What if the future of our cities wasn't about rebuilding, but reimagining, starting from below the ground? Today, I'm sitting down with Jennifer Koster, co-founder of Workwell, whose innovative vision is flipping the script on climate-resilient development. Instead of simply restoring communities devastated by California wildfires, she's asking, what if we built back smarter, stronger, and more sustainable, right from the foundation? Jennifer isn't just thinking about green energy. She's redefining how we design, construct, and protect our communities in the face of growing environmental challenges. From cutting-edge infrastructure that starts beneath our feet to bold strategies that turn disaster recovery into a launch pad for progress, she's leading the charge in sustainable innovation. Join us as we dive into her game-changing ideas, the future of wildfire-resilient cities, and how we can move beyond what's always been done to shape communities that are built to last. If you're looking for a visionary take on the future of sustainable development, come on in. Jennifer, welcome. Thank you for joining me today on this episode of Productive Passions. It's such a pleasure having you here.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Your entrepreneurial journey spans an impressive spectrum, from retail and media to fitness, sports, and construction. With Workwell representing your latest venture into global impact, your ability to traverse the diverse industries suggests a restless curiosity and adaptive intelligence that goes beyond traditional career paths. Before we get into your current work, though, what fundamental drive or core belief has consistently propelled you through these varied landscapes, and what connects them?
I was consulting oil and gas companies on their positioning and investor relations.
3 years old?
Yeah.
Wow.
And the .com company that I went into was actually a startup in the financial media space. So they were one of the first companies that was putting the stock ticker online and then aggregating all this content about stocks. So I was learning I was in that world and learning all this stuff. And I'm a really good writer. So I actually got brought in to write a lot of the copy for press releases, a lot of the copy around investor relations materials and business plans. So for a few years, I was developing business plans. And because in my former company, I developed this sort of network of investors, was also, helping connect interesting companies to investors and things like that. So I kind of got like really in the weeds of it at a really young age. And then, of course, we all know the .com market blew out. and I was like, okay, now what am I going to do? And it was really bad because I kept accepting payment in stock, which seemed like a great idea at the time. So when the .com market blew out, so did my paper millionaire net worth. So then I actually was trying to figure out what was next and had a conversation with my father where, at 26 or whatever I was at the time, I thought my life was over. I lost everything. That was it. And I was complaining because I said, I just want to do something tangible, but I don't know what that is. And in his very sort of serious Dutch banker tech guy sort of way, he's like, oh, you want tangible? Go into construction. And for whatever reason, something just clicked. And I was like, oh, it's actually not a horrible idea. Construction's there's always a business there. I like this idea of taking something from paper into the real world. It is kind of entrepreneurial. And I had been sharing an office space with the guy that was building a house. So I kept bugging his builders after that. So, what are the margins like? What's the process? How long does it take to build a house like Don's? And, how does it work? And ended up becoming the business side of a construction company that I ended up starting with one of the project managers who was building this guy's house. And that was interesting because, again, I have a thing with steep learning curves. It's really interesting.
You get bored easy. So that stimulates your need to learn quick.
Exactly. So I ended up going into construction and really was handling the clients and the contracts and the insurance, like the bigger stuff. I wasn't dealing with the stuff in the field at all. And then on the side, I was still consulting companies that were in the tech space, a lot of mobile application technologies. So I did a bit of a detour for a while into that space. And then had an opportunity to expand the company to Los Angeles, and because I had been doing a lot of consulting work for some companies that were based in LA in the media and entertainment space, largely around technology and new applications for media delivery. And this is before, iTunes was a thing, and before any of this digital media delivery was happening. So I was in the forefront seeing all this European technology coming out and where it was going to go. And we were just, super, super early on that front. So one of these moments of, okay, what do I do next? I ended up connecting with someone who is very similar to my Canada experience. I connected with a guy that was also trying to start a construction company and needed somebody like me to kind of organize it and negotiate things. And he happened to have a massive celebrity client with him. I ended up negotiating the whole deal with the business management team, with the legal team, and structuring everything, and started the construction company in Los Angeles. My original partner from Canada and I split off. So I was US, he took Canada. And I got into some really cool, interesting projects, and the company grew very quickly. It was super interesting. We were working with some of the top architects, top designers, a lot of celebrity and high net worth clients. And for a long time, I really, really loved it. And then I think there was a part of me that was just kind of felt like an employee again. And I felt like I was in a box, and I'm someone, I need to reinvent constantly. It's just part of who I am. And it was super stressful on top of it. So we were making a lot of money and sort of living that dialogue that I think most of us grow up with, get a degree, start your own company, get a good job, the whole thing, get married, have the kids, and that whole narrative of like what supposedly makes us happy. And I was living it, and I was miserable. And I thought, what is wrong with me? I have everything I thought that I wanted. I'm miserable. I had a massive breakdown in 2017, and my husband and I, we took the kids, and I said, okay, we're going to take a big chance. We're taking 5 weeks. We're going to Europe, and I just need a break. I just need to get out of here. And it was very risky because we had a lot of big projects going on at the time. And so we did that. And on the second day, it was like, so what are we doing in Los Angeles again? And that started a whole different conversation of, where do we want to be? What does that look like? He's European as well. My background, my parents were European immigrants to Canada. And we very quickly were like, okay, well, let's move here, and then we'll figure that out.
Oh, and where was here?
The Netherlands.
Wow, I love that. One of the things that I hear frequently from people is exactly what you just said is everything. What is wrong with me that I'm miserable or I don't want to be here anymore? And it seems like it's an alignment thing, right? It may have been something that you loved doing in the past, but things have changed. So kudos to you and your family for saying, let's figure this out instead of just continue to be here and be miserable out of some sense of duty or fear is what it tends to be. Gosh, I love that. I love that constant reinvention. But to do that, it takes some kind of confidence to be able to step into .com world, to step into construction when that's not your background. Do you feel like you were brought up to be very confident, or is it just something you've always had?
No, definitely not. I think I definitely, I feel like I've had this feeling of that I would be successful at what I did from quite a young age. And so I've always been very driven and motivated. And, but I think the confidence was acquired because I was also the kid that was bullied through most of elementary school. My parents got divorced when I was quite young, and my mother had a stroke, and that really impacted me. And I was not the popular kid. I mean, I became popular in high school, but I was generally not the popular kid. I was kind of like the ugly duckling.
There's a good message to you young people. Be careful, because those people can turn out to be very beautiful people. And not just, I don't mean just physically. I mean, we're kind of joking about that, but people have a tendency to grow. And so be careful who you pick on, or let me just say, don't pick on people to begin with, because it's just horrible.
Absolutely. At the same time, I would absolutely not be who I am if it wasn't through going through a lot of these things and really having to really develop myself and my own inner strength and my own inner conviction about who I am. And so as much as I would love to, blame it on the bullies, I actually kind of want to praise them, because I would not be I would absolutely not be who I am if it wasn't for that. If my life had been super easy and super, just simple, then I probably would not have been challenged personally in such a way that I developed the way that I have. And I think that's a lot of it. It's like an inner drive. There was something that's always been an inner drive for me. And my mother was a wonderful support system because she dealt with that a lot herself. She was Dutch Indonesian and came to the Netherlands at a time that there was a lot of racism here. I learned a lot of her stories. So she brought a lot of lessons into me of how to be resilient and how to just focus on myself and focus on what makes me happy. And that was an incredible foundation to start from.
I think that's an important message. And it's something I hear over and over with people that I talk to. It may not be bullying, but it's in those really hard, challenging times of people's lives, mine included, that you develop that inner strength, that resilience, that determination to do more things, to try things that maybe you wouldn't have tried, you wouldn't have thought about. But because you've overcome really hard things, it gives you a bit of a foundation for what's to come. So I guess if there's a message, if somebody is listening to this and they're identifying with being bullied or going through really hard times, my message to people, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is keep going, because eventually you do get through the other side of it. And what you're building along the way, it may not feel useful in the moment, but what you're building along the way is a foundation for what's to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I would add to that, go within. And I think that's the biggest thing I've learned is, it's life. There's always going to be things that are out of our control. There's always going to be unpleasant things as well as good things. And I think the more people that I speak to about this, the more I recognize that there's really, it's sort of the natural ebb and flow of life. And it's also what makes us stronger, what makes us grateful. It makes us, it makes it interesting. I mean, could you imagine if every day was the same, and it was just vanilla and everything was happy and, that's not really living. It's not fun to go through the hard things, but it really does make us stronger and make us appreciate more what we do have. So I do think it's important. And I've been working on a book for 10 years called The Truth About Baggage, which really talks about this idea that we all have baggage. And the more we understand it, the more we can connect our baggage with how it's manifesting itself in our decision-making and our even relationships. And then the next part of that is really, every single person you interact with is bringing their own baggage into the conversation in some capacity or another. And when you start to think about that, then you at least for me, you develop a lot more empathy for others that, maybe snap at you because you cut them off in traffic or whatever. You start to just learn to let that stuff go because there's no point in reacting to something that's not in your control, but also often not in their control.
That's good for me to hear, because right before this conversation, I was actually driving and I had this young kid cut the person off behind me. So like almost hit me. And then he drove up next to me and flipped me off. And I thought, let me tell you, years ago, I would have not taken that very well and probably done it back to him. And this time I was just like, how ridiculous. How ridiculous is that? But what happened in his day that made him he was obviously in such a hurry. So I do want to go back and ask you, you said that has taught you, the challenges has taught you to go within. What does that mean? When you go within, what does that mean for you?
So I've later in my life, I've become a lot more aware of different things. When I sense resistance, whether it's within a relationship or within a business deal or within just something is just not feeling right, I really pay attention to that. And I try to go within and look at the situation from am I trying to force something that doesn't make sense? Why do I want it in the first place? And what is the event and whatever it might be, let's call it a business deal. And then I take some time to really reflect on what's driving me and if it's really in alignment with my values. And this is just in the last few years I've started doing that. And it was part of the motivation to move here. I mean, we moved to the Netherlands 4.5 years ago. And when I left, or in the process leading up to that, what I recognized was I did a lot of things work-wise that I didn't love. I worked for a lot of people that I didn't like. I worked with a lot of people that I didn't like. And our time is precious. And unfortunately, it's something we only realize as we get older in life. So now I do these sort of constant internal check-ins to kind of go, okay, what's not working well and why is that? And I allow myself to accept that A, we live in seasons and not every season is sunny and fantastic. And B, that it's just the natural flow of things, that not everything goes well. And then trying to identify what that means for me. What does that mean that it's not going well? And why isn't it going well? And am I attaching myself to a meaning that maybe isn't actually reflective of what I'm trying to get out of a situation or a deal or whatever?
I love that. I think that's so valuable. When you have that resistance, am I forcing something? Do I really want it? And what is my objective? Those are some great questions because, like you mentioned earlier, we all bring our own baggage when we have a conversation, when we have a meeting, when we're doing work. And it doesn't have to be bad baggage. It's we bring who we are. And so there can be a tendency to want to stand your ground if somebody challenges you or expresses total opposition to what you've said. And I think a lot of times what I see is people get stuck and they just need to defend their position. And I'm guilty of this too. But boy, if we start and say, wait a minute, what's my objective? And am I trying to force things? Because I know, and it's something I say to my kids, you can make anything happen. You can force anything to happen. Those are some great questions to ask, especially what is my objective and what do I really want? Because it may turn the whole reaction to the situation 180 degrees.
Yeah.
It's really great advice.
Well, and it leads into, I guess, the second part of this, it's just what I'm doing now and why, because in the move wasn't just a move. The move was a reinvention of myself, my career, my family, and kind of starting fresh in a new country, which is super scary, super risky, but I would never have changed it for anything, for what I was looking for when I came here. And so that took me in a different direction. It kind of took all of my experience, the technology bit with the management consulting and startup component and construction, and put it into one big bucket, basically, where what I realized was my passion is actually helping people and that I have this ability to connect dots. And so I thought, how does that turn into something? And, construction, I'm still passionate about construction. And what I noticed was the way projects are run and the way that we're building, it's not as sophisticated as it should be. And so Workwell first started as a firm to help people through the construction process. And we said, okay, well, what if we took how we ran our projects, which was really also this mixture. We used technology, which companies of our size didn't use, for project management and for estimating so that we would have greater accuracies. We had this technology component and we had this organizational structure. So my management consulting hat of like, how do we organize people and create a framework so that this project can be successful and not have the problems that most construction, especially we were in residential. So there's always problems in residential. And then how can we create a trust relationship with the owner where we're getting involved in the projects in an early stage? I'm making sure that design and budget objectives are fully aligned. So it was basically taking what we did as a construction firm and how we ran projects and turning that into a service that we could provide to building owners. And now we're doing that from residential all the way up to healthcare. It's super satisfying because we help people understand the process better. And I mean, I say this to almost everyone that I meet, like, ask 5 of your friends what their experience was with a contractor and if they would recommend them. And you would be lucky if one of them had a good experience and was saying, yeah, here's my contractor. Most of the time, it's a horrible experience. The vast majority, if not all of the time, it's more expensive than what you think it's going to be at the outset. And it also takes generally more time than what is mentioned at the beginning. So
yes.
And the part of the reason for that is the whole process just actually doesn't make sense. It's extremely linear. So most people start with the architect and then go through the entire process, get a plan done where they're designing let's stick to residential to keep it simple, design their dream house. And then it goes to the contractor to bid it out. And then all the bids come back. They're all formatted differently. The numbers are all different. And the numbers usually much higher than what they were told the architect, had a budget for. Because the architects don't understand construction costs, typically. There's very few. I've been doing this for almost 20 years. You go into this process going to the architect saying, okay, I want to build this kind of house and this is my budget. Architects are artists. They will take the information that you give them and they will turn that into an artist rendition of your home and interpret that in a certain way that has nothing to do with construction cost.
I see. That's starting to make sense now.
And the unfortunate thing about that is contractors are not artists. Contractors are, tell us what to build, give us the plan, and we'll get it done. And unfortunately, there's this big gap in the middle of the plans being detailed enough to actually build for the contractor to give you a proper price, and the plans being detailed enough for them to actually understand what they're building in the full scope of what you're trying to. And we've seen this. It doesn't matter what budget project. I mean, we've done multi-million-dollar projects where the plan details are not significant enough to really give an accurate budget. Now, in that situation, a lot of times they'll just pay the change orders and acknowledge that that's what it is. But if you're a normal person, you can't afford to have a project go from a $500,000 project to $1 million project. Right? So, and unfortunately, that's what happens a lot. So anyway, going back to where we started, my passion was really, how can we fix this system that's advantageous for the person who's literally just trying to get their dream home built? And it's the largest amount of money you'll ever spend in your life on any one thing. And that was the goal. And now we've expanded that. And the Netherlands move was really interesting. And this is another thing about resistance. We launched it and we said, okay, let's just see what happens. And we found a lot of resistance in the residential community in the Netherlands, whereas in the US, we found a lot of openness to what we were doing. So we learned that the differences were, in Los Angeles, of course, you have much bigger projects. A normal remodel starts at $500,000. Here in the Netherlands, that's a major remodel. So you've got this completely different perspective on the market. And then we started looking at, okay, how can we actually, what's the real value that we're adding? So in our early projects, we learned very quickly that our value is that we can save people about 30% on average, which is actually really boils down to the unnecessary loss that's between the design phase and the construction bid, and the lack of understanding on how to align the design and the budget together so that it's aligned from the earliest stages and it's carried through the entire framework of the project, so that by the time you're getting to the project, yeah, maybe you're a little bit higher than what you expected because it's inflation or whatever the case might be, but you're not higher enough that you have to go back through the redesign process and value engineer the project and go through.
So how do you do that, Jennifer? And the wheels are turning. So how do you do that at the beginning? Because you've got the architects who are more dreamers, I would say. That's what I would characterize them. They're artists. And then the contractors who are more black and white, they're going to get the job done. From the beginning, how do you get those aligned?
So we are exceptionally good at defining scope of work and filtering information out from our clients about what they're looking for. And it applies to either a remodel situation or a ground up new construction situation. The very first thing that we do is create the scope of work and try to understand how the owner is seeing their project, and then aligning that to some figures and give them a budget range so that we can say, okay, this is, and actually we work with them to look at their design intent as well, because, it's very different to build a house for a celebrity who's bringing in a top-notch designer and everything is custom versus, an average home where maybe they're going to put in an IKEA kitchen and, it's two completely different ways of estimating.
Right,
and you can't compare them. So we first try to identify what is your actual vision for the project, and filter that down into a detailed scope of work that we can attach numbers to, and then give them a range. So look, this is the range we're coming at for what you have in your mind. This is the range. And if they're okay with that, Then we help them bring in the architects to actually design it. And we give the architects a framework and I guess, if you will, a fenced yard to work within so that they're not just running down the path and creating all these different ideas that don't fit a budget. And that's the biggest point of capturing that loss, as well as looking at how do you create more transparency with your contractor. So we're big believers in open book contracting, and we're also big believers in owners taking greater control over decisions around materials and things like that, from windows and doors to cabinetry to tile, so that there's transparency. And oftentimes it's interesting, a lot of the contractors we work with, they don't actually want to be ordering all of that stuff. They would rather that be someone else's responsibility, often a designer or the architect or the owner. And by taking that out of their purview, it also often decreases the margin that they'll charge, because they're not charging a margin on stuff that they're not ordering directly. In a nutshell, we take a holistic view on projects and then organize them in such a way that through the entire process, there's a much more structured approach and a structured communication with everybody to make sure that we're still in that framework of what we're trying to accomplish, both from a design perspective and a budget perspective.
To tell you, what you've just laid out is an entirely different way to go about structuring business, to go about looking and thinking and responding to business. And I think not only is it more efficient, but like you said, 30%. When you said that to me, I thought, well, I wonder how in the world they're able to shave 30% off. But when you do all the things you've just talked about, it makes complete sense. People are beginning to understand from the very beginning. How did you get to that? Was it just kind of looking at things and going, okay, this makes no sense. Let's rethink this?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it frankly, a lot of it had to do with moving to a new country and going, okay, so now we're here. We saved enough money to be here for a couple of years, but we need an income. And what does that look like? And what is really exciting? And where do we see? So we had a lot of conversations about where we saw, and this actually started even back from our 2017 trip, where we started talking about where the deficiencies are in the industry, because we were in the middle of it, and became very determined to try and address those. So Workwell is now actually a group of companies. What I described to you is one of the companies under our umbrella that's client facing. And now we're dealing with residential all the way up to healthcare and hospitals. And the interesting Netherlands piece of that was this really quick introduction, again, steep learning curve into how buildings are built here in the Netherlands, where there's a lot more focus on sustainability, energy efficiency, circular economy, and how do we really actually build better buildings and do that in a cost-effective manner. So now when you layer in that sustainability piece, it gets really, really interesting, because now you're not just talking about, okay, what is my cost of construction? You start going into what is my actual cost of operation. Now, if you have a well-insulated building, it doesn't have to be a home, because like I said, now we're all the way up into healthcare and hospitals, then you're spending more money to get to that well-insulated home, but your long tail, your real costs in operating and heating and cooling and all of these things gets lower. And so we've really kind of been advocates about taking this holistic project approach and considering not just your upfront capital expenditure, but also your operating expenditure. And that's been that's kind of been what's driving us. And one of the interesting things that happened in this whole evolution of us as a company, and also the evolution of me as a person, interestingly enough, is we found this opportunity to create a bridge between the Netherlands and the US, North American market, US, Canada, by bringing this design innovation and sustainable solutions, next generation infrastructure, and all of these interesting things that they've been doing here for years, because it's just part of the regulatory environment, into the US market to really try and accelerate, okay, how can we build better buildings, and how can we kind of remove this myth that building better buildings means it's more expensive, because that's actually not the case.
How is that going for you with the US customers?
It's incredible. I mean, we have a couple of very large projects that we're working on in the US side. We've now expanded and we have a development company. So we're developing some of our own projects. Some of them are standalone buildings. So we're working on our first standalone building that it's actually a public-private partnership to acquire a building and essentially showcase a number of design innovations and materials and thinking and construction approaches in a single building.
So you're taking an existing building and sort of retrofitting it to to bring it to standards that are more sustainable and that will eventually save on cost.
Yes. And turning that into a showcase of why we need to do this differently, what that actually looks like physically, and being able to use the entire building as a story, as the narrative for encouraging this. And that's a big part of my mission now is we can build better buildings, and we can, having been in the construction side and dealing with drywall, for example, which is a horribly toxic material that if you've ever been around it when they're sanding it, it gets in your system and it doesn't leave for a couple of days, and it's horrible stuff. And looking at what are the alternatives for that? For example, what are the alternatives to toxic paints? What are the alternatives to flooring materials? What are the alternatives to demoing things and having it end up in a landfill? And can we rethink that? And there's a lot of really fantastic companies that are rethinking that. So we work with Interface, which is a US company that has manufacturing here in the Netherlands, and they are hands down the leader in circular materials. I mean, what they're doing is absolutely phenomenal. And the founder was committed for decades to really driving the sustainability agenda. And now we're seeing a lot more of these kind of initiatives happening where there's really a focus on how do we really do things better and how do we create less waste, because there's so much waste in the construction industry.
I want to shift gears a little bit. When I learned about you and the work that you do, really the biggest story going on were the LA wildfires. All of the fires and the devastation that was occurring. You have gotten involved with the municipalities there. Tell me a little bit about that. I don't want to put words in your mouth, and I don't understand it, but I'd like to understand, how is Workwell, how are you working with the state, the local governments to make a difference?
Yeah, it kind of just happened naturally. I mean, we had 24 clients that lost their homes, and somewhere around the same amount of friends and colleagues that have lost their homes in the fires. And, sitting far away, watching what was happening from the Netherlands was heartbreaking. And just, because I know the area so well, I mean, obviously we built a number of homes in that area. It's we were in the Palisades. Most of our clients were in the Palisades, and that area, that strip all the way up to Malibu. It was heartbreaking to see that. And it was one of my favorite communities. And I immediately thought, okay, what can we do? So originally it started with, let's set up a link and a resource for people to connect with us so that we can maybe just help ease their pain and help organize the process, because you've got to deal with short-term temporary housing. You need to deal with your insurance claim. You need to deal with listening to all these town halls to try and figure out what's actually going on and when can you actually rebuild, and can you get back into your house? Can you see if there's anything left? All of these questions and all of these things. And we had done a lot of disaster recovery and insurance claim work. And we thought, okay, well, let's just see if we can be a resource for people, someone to connect with and just, talk them off the ledge, because a lot of people just had no idea where to go. And there's just a lot of uncertainty. It's getting better, but there's, it's a massive undertaking to organize something like this. And so the first step was, well, let's see if we can just, lend a hand. And as we started talking to some of our colleagues, and because of this large public-private partnership we're involved with, bringing European and Dutch solutions into the US market, we thought, well, let's see if we can really lend a hand and at a higher level get involved in the discussion of not just rebuilding what was there, but rethinking what we rebuild and having those higher level discussions on what should that be? What kind of expertise can we bring in, both locally, nationally, and globally, to rebuilding in the right way so that there is greater resilience to these types of incidents? Because, I lived in Southern California for many, many years, and there wasn't a year that we didn't have a wildfire somewhere.
So what you're talking about isn't just rebuilding homes. It's looking at the geography. Correct me if I'm wrong. Looking at the geography and going, we got to do this differently because the fires will likely come back. How do we make this so it's more survivable for people and what they build? Is that fair?
Yeah, and also rethinking. I mean, it gets to the really complex layers of, do we need to rethink certain codes and requirements in the building process for these areas? From, do we have rooftop outdoor sprinklers? I mean, most of the projects that we did were tear downs of an old home and then new construction. And they all had sprinkler systems. But that, as soon as something that scale happens, they're diverting water to try and get, the fire hydrants full. And of course, that was also an issue because there's a lack of water, and California's been in a drought forever. But then you look into some of the other regulations like LID planters. So it's effectively a planter that's capturing all of your rainwater off of your roof. It gets filtered through the planter and then it's put out into the storm drain. Why are we doing that when we have a situation of severe drought? A lot of the reason for that is when it does rain in California, it's not the Netherlands. You're not getting rain fairly consistently for months and months out of the year. You're getting these massive dumps of rain in short periods of time. And so it's been designed around that. And I think that whole approach needs to be rethought. And so one of the things that we're hoping to do is really bring in some water management experts. You would not believe it, but we deal with drought in the Netherlands as well, which just seems absolutely ridiculous because there's water everywhere and we're below sea level. But there are drought situations here, and there's a lot of discussion around climate change and water management here. And there's a lot of expertise that we kind of thought, well, we're already in this project that we have, and in a lot of things that we're doing in general, we're already sort of this bridge between the two places. Why couldn't we bring that thinking into helping with the fires and put together a consortium of experts from all different domains to try and look at this holistically? Because I think that's the challenge is you can't address just one thing, one piece at a time. You really need to look at the whole thing and everything from, the deconstruction strategy. How do we deconstruct these materials and maybe filter out what could be reused and come up with a solution and a strategy to reuse them? The Dutch, and the Dutch and the French actually are absolutely phenomenal at circular materials and taking things from one place and reformulating that or mixing it with other things and turning that into new materials. We need to be thinking that way. And the US has not really adopted circularity. And when they have, it's like, okay, we'll take these old light fixtures out of this building and, sell them or refurbish them and put them somewhere else. That is not circularity. Circularity is at a large scale, taking materials and from a material science perspective, breaking that down into, okay, what are we dealing with here and how can we reuse this in the most effective way? And doing that at a local level to the greatest. So taking old materials and bringing that back into as new materials into the new projects.
So what ultimately will be work well and your position or work in California to address what's happened?
It's super uncertain. I think there's a lot of people trying to position themselves, of course, looking at this as an opportunity. We've been having conversations with the U.S. Green Building Council and putting together a consortium of people to try and get an audience so we can approach this from the right way and express our interest, not just as Workwell, but express our interest as a kind of an ecosystem of different partners that can add value into the discussion. And we're in the early stages of doing that. So we've been having a lot of conversations. We've been having conversations with some of the homeowners associations where you have, multiple units that have been destroyed. It's still early. I think there's still a lot of uncertainty around insurance funding that's going to be in place and how much is that. So I will know more. I mean, it's too bad we weren't doing this in a couple of weeks because I'm flying to Los Angeles next week. So I'll know a lot more after we get through that on just sort of the lay of the land and who's who. But we're as a consortium really trying to add value. We have one of the leading biochar experts who's based in the US in our team and looking at all of the burnt material that's been created and saying, okay, how can we maybe use that at scale to help regenerate? Because it's not just we need to clean up all the debris and get it out of there so people can rebuild. We need to regreen this area and try to actually get the soil functioning properly, get trees back in a place that, we can grow trees there, really understand what the land needs so that we can be in a better position to prevent this from happening to the scale that it has going forward. And then you've got the construction component of that, which is, actually there's two parts of that. Then you've got the infrastructure component. Was the infrastructure set up in a way that was conducive to the fire thing? And a lot of the discussion has been around, if we went underground with our power, that would be one of the things that would help address this, which is absolutely true. But then looking at the whole infrastructure for an area from a community-based position versus what's done now is, you've got the main infrastructure and then every house is attached to it. And is there a better way? Is there a better approach to create greater resilience for everybody? And then you get into the construction of the buildings themselves. And what are the materials? What is the position of the building? What are the things that we can do at a community level to help prevent this, so that if it happens again, yeah, maybe you're getting a few houses, but because these measures have been put in place, the damage is mitigated. So those are the big conversations that we're trying to put ourselves in the middle of, and have been very intentionally building a fantastic consortium of people that have that knowledge and experience to do so.
To tell you, that's such a relief to hear that, as somebody who loves that part of the country, who has friends and family that are out there. I know that there are a lot of people with great ideas, and there are a lot of people and organizations that are very opportunistic, but to have sort of, like you said, a consortium of people and experts who can sit down together and say, here's how I can lend a hand, here's what we need to think about, then I have more hope that it won't just get rebuilt. The houses won't just get rebuilt, but the land will be taken care of. The nature can be brought back in to help regenerate everything. And that the building, when it does happen, will happen in a way that is more resilient than how it's been. Because there's no blaming anybody. Things were built back then to the best of our knowledge then. We're continually evolving. So I believe our responsibility as people who have evolved, where there are experts who can weigh in, is to bring those people together and have a very coordinated response and plan to how this is going to be. Everything's going to be rebuilt.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think just going back to like my goal would be that we actually take what we're really good at, which is looking at this whole situation holistically. I don't care if it's my expert in biochar or somebody else's expert or my soil expert, or it's creating that framework on how do we look at this from a total systems perspective of everything that needs to be done there. And then equally importantly, creating that framework on how do you decide who is going to do the work? And that's the bigger challenge. And how do you filter through those people? How do you make sure it's not just a cash grab, which is unfortunately what a lot of people in this industry see. It's like, this is gone. Well, let's start trying to buy up all the land and help these owners out and get them out of here. And or the construction guys that come in and, we'll rebuild your house for you. There needs to be a concerted effort of how do we do this the right way, and then really honor the people that lived there. So that, this is such a painful tragedy for them. These people have lost everything. How do you give them that roadmap and the choice of deciding to go back or not? Because I think and what's happened so far, to my knowledge, is that they're expediting permitting so that you can rebuild the house that you had. But is that the solution? And I don't think so.
Well, and also what I'm hearing you saying is it's not just rebuilding from the ground up. It's really deeper than the ground. So I'm very happy that you and Workwell are a part of this, because I know that you're thinking about this very holistically and unselfishly. And I think that's ego has to come out of that at this point to really rebuild and be resilient.
Well, and that's true in everything, right? What's the direction that we need to go in general in construction? Like, we simply just need to start doing things differently and doing things better.
I want to ask you a couple questions about your journey. What has been the most challenging part of your journey when you look back on it, and how did you get past that?
I think it probably goes for everyone. The challenging parts are those unexpected detours that you take where you're really, hit rock bottom and kind of go, okay, and for most people, it doesn't just happen once, unfortunately. And it can be different things. It can be your personal life. It can be your career. And I think luckily I hit it sounds weird, but luckily I hit rock bottom on a career and financial place really early in my life. And as difficult as it was, I would never change anything, because that really was like, okay, I just got to get back up. Just, get back up again, pull your socks up and, figure it out. But it is difficult when you're in it and all you see is, the immediate of what you're dealing with. It is really, really hard to look further down the line and still be hopeful. And I guess the thing that I've gotten really good at, and this is also relatively recent, really trying to tap into that present moment. And what can I do in this present moment to make this moment better? Whether that's going for a walk, getting out in the forest, meditating, playing a game with my kids, eating something that cheesecake, like whatever, just really, again, what I said earlier, like go within and just really kind of find these little things that can just get you through. Because at the end of the day, they are moments, they're seasons. And, we're all having good and bad seasons, and just tapping back into yourself. And, I did this the other day. I took a whole day off because I was in a really bad funk. And I just, I'm like, I'm taking a me day.
And people will hear that and they go, well, that she can do that. I can't do that. And I would disagree, because if you have a sick day, you don't have to have a fever to take a sick day. It might be really necessary to prevent getting to that required sick day. But I love that you talk about that. And there's always a place where I want to hit rewind, where somebody has said something, and I've had a couple of them here. And what you just said, I think, is important for people to know. It's easy to look at people who are successful and go, it's just work for them. It's just work. But realizing that people who are successful, maybe part of the reason they're successful is because they've had really hard challenges. They work their way through them. They know that it's not the end of the world. I think that's so incredibly important for people to hear from people like yourselves who say, it didn't just happen once. Maybe it's happened repeatedly, but I'm okay.
Well, and the other thing is just being willing to ask for help and being willing to be vulnerable, which for me was really difficult. I mean, I grew up in a household where, other than, like, my mother was more expressive, but after my parents got divorced, I stayed with my father because I was involved in so many sports and my mother didn't drive. So just being willing to ask for help and go through the emotion and let that come out. I mean, I'm going through a divorce, and I've had, unfortunately, many moments where I've just had, like, cried with my colleagues, and it's actually created a different dynamic in our company. Like, there's a really, yes, we're here to work. Yes, I'm the boss.
I was going to say, wait, you're the boss and you cried in front of people?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm human, we're all human. And I would rather do that and have my staff feel comfortable crying to me if they were having an issue than, and I don't even want to call them my staff, because they're like a family. We're all kind of we have this very wonderful relationship, and we're very different people. I mean, I could not have more diverse group of people in my company, but that's also what makes it so special and so interesting. And we're really, it's just life. Sometimes you deal with stuff. Sometimes you've got challenges with your kids. Sometimes and I think that's been one of the biggest mistakes that my parents' generation made, was really having such a division between these things that you almost had you literally had your work life and your life, and it's not healthy. We need each other. Life is hard. Life has challenges. There's just, one obstacle after another, and then you have a bunch of really cool stuff that happens and everybody celebrates, but we need each other, and we're all going through different stuff at different times. Like, I have friends that are having the time of their life right now, and in their relationships or in their companies. And you're always like at different phases.
Thank goodness, right? Because if everybody was down at the same time, there'd be nobody to lift us up. And to your point, be willing to be vulnerable. That's a hard thing to do when you're expected to be on top of, and you've got a lot of responsibility. I love that you talk about that.
No, I was just going to say, and I'm a woman that was in largely male industries where it was just like, you had to be like a guy. I mean, I wore so many pantsuits. It was just ridiculous. And I came up in the stock market with this .com company, was in tech, then was management consulting in tech. Like, I have always been in male industries, and I've found now, and as I've gotten a little bit older and more comfortable with myself and my own vulnerability, it's actually super, super powerful to be in my feminine energy and just be like, yeah, this is me. And that going back to this whole idea of this flow thing, I worked really hard in LA to achieve what I did. And it sounds really horrible. I don't work that hard here because I'm in this different space and different flow of things. Things are coming to me like an unbelievable opportunities, unbelievable people, unbelievable just projects and things like that that are just coming to me because I've shifted my energy and I've shifted my focus. My focus was on money very much when I was in LA. It was just about earning and money and, like the next deal. And since I've shifted that it's really coming from a place of genuineness where I really love what I do and I love the people that I work with and I love adding value to projects and having fun and great dynamic teams, it's just kind of become easy.
I love that for you. So your focus went from earning to just how would you say the second part of that? I went from focus on earning money, power, maybe all of that stuff to what? What was it that changed that you focused on?
Authenticity and purpose.
Love that. I'm writing that down.
Yeah, that's what it all comes down. And, and the funny thing is we're all told these things and, find your purpose, and we all read the books, and it really comes from a place super deep within you. And you need to go through all the bumps and the disappointments in yourself to go, why am I doing this again? And, Simon Sinek does it so great. Like, what's your why? Once you get to the root of your why, your personal why, everything else, and it takes some time to get there. It's not like, oh, well,
We hear these things and we hear it. We go, yes, I want that, but we don't get it yet. We hear it again. Yes, again, but I'm not there yet. I think for most people, we have to hear the message repeatedly and in different voices. I've had this conversation so frequently lately about all of the experts and gurus who say, follow me, I'll teach you how to make your life great. And being super judgmental about that personally.
Yeah.
And then realizing that maybe all those voices are needed because we're going to identify with the one that makes most sense to us, whether it's culturally or the way we think or the way we act or the type of work we do. So it's not necessarily a bad thing that there are so many voices. I would say be careful of people who say you have to pay me and then I'll make you happy, because that's not how it works. Having coaches and advisors and mentors, yes, but we have to follow our path. But I think we also have to keep what you just said in mind. Am I going to keep day after day churning and churning and churning and churning and burning myself out? Or can I get to a place where I say, this is what I love. This is what's most important to me. Then for some reason, it seems like things open up and it does begin to flow. And doing this podcast, I will say, I hear that repeatedly. So I hope that our guests also hear that. And if they're in a place where they feel like they're just grinding and grinding, because I talk to people a lot of the times who feel like that they can keep listening to that message, the other messages out there about getting to a place of more peace and finding whatever method of message that really resonates with them.
Yeah. And, let's be honest, it usually takes a major life event or a major disappointment to happen for you to really do that work in yourself, because it doesn't, if everything's great, if you're, happy marriage, your career's going well, everything's going well, there's nothing that's confronting you to make you go, wait a minute, I need to rethink this, or this doesn't feel right. And that is the journey, actually. That our journey is really about going through all these ebbs and flows of life and getting deeper and deeper within ourselves to get in contact with that, authenticity and purpose. It's just necessary, and it's unfortunate. And I think the more that and this goes back to this whole idea of resistance, the more that we resist the idea that we're not supposed to feel crappy some days, the more crappy we will feel. If you just kind of go, all right, it's just not my day, I'm going to just allow whatever this is to go through me, and at some point I'll have some clarity. And it's not that difficult. The sad thing is, in our education system, we're not given all these tools at a young age on how to deal with things, and they're the simplest tools ever: journaling, getting out in nature, doing something that you really enjoy, exercise, eating well, meditation, yoga, movement, like all of these things that are free and are available to everybody. And we're not taught how to actually cope with ourselves.
Yeah. So that's important. That self-care that's everybody's talking about right now. It's important. I said, a lot of times the things that we talk about, exactly this topic, would have been labeled as new age, frou-frou, hippie like. Well, guess what? It seems like they knew what they were talking about, and they lived these. People eventually get to these very peaceful places because of those practices. So thank you for sharing that with us. Jennifer, it has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. And I know your schedule has been ridiculously busy. So I am very, very grateful. I do want to ask you one more thing. I am starting a new thing where I'm asking guests to pose a question for a future guest of mine.
Okay.
I should have given you a heads up. That's probably not fair. But if you could ask somebody anything about anything, what would it be?
What is the legacy you hope to leave?
And then for you, what is the answer to that question for you?
I really hope to leave my children a planet that's in better shape than it is today. And to do that through a combination of innovation and community. And that's why I stayed in construction when I came here, because I saw an opportunity to use my knowledge across these different areas to figure out how we create that and how we create the next generation of communities so that we can be thriving, not surviving.
I appreciate that. Thank you.